Looking for clarity and confidence when it comes to decision making for your business? You've come to the right place. You're now listening to the Atomic Business Coaching Podcast.
All right, so today we're going to talk about attention management. And a lot of people are always complaining about time management versus attention management. We're going to cover that in a little bit further detail a little later on. But we're also going to talk about setting the intention so that you can direct your attention, right? Because without an intention, where does your attention really go? Then we're going to talk about the 4 quadrants of attention management, and we'll get into much deeper detail. And I just want to preface that this is based on a book by Maura Thomas called Attention Management. And I highly recommend that you look into getting that book because it really has changed my life. And the last thing we'll talk about today is how to implement attention management in your day-to-day. So without further ado, let's get started. Okay, in this section, we're going to talk about time management versus attention management. So Adam, what is the number one thing that most of our clients complain about? Adam is very distracted right now.
What?
That was good. That was a good illustration, my friend, of attention management versus time management. So thank you for that illustration. Well, distractibility is one of the reasons why people struggle with attention management. And we'll talk a little bit about that in the 4 quadrants section. But, I always hear our clients say, I don't have enough time. I don't have enough time. I don't have enough time. And the bottom line is we have enough time. It's where do we want to direct our attention and use our time? So what are your thoughts on time management? Is it an archaic thing? Is it something we should still be using? Or is it really attention management?
Yeah. So, I don't think you can really separate the two, right? So when you want to have attention management, you had to have previously managed the time that you're going to pay attention, right? Even for me, I've been 24 years doing stuff like this and advising and coaching and running businesses, and I still have to be very disciplined through time management. And what I need to do is know exactly what's on my calendar, what's my day planner, what's happening. But I do that all before I start the work. And I think what happens is most people want to pay attention, but they don't know what's coming next. And because they haven't managed their time appropriately.
Right.
And I think there's nothing more valuable in your business and in your life than your time. Right. I don't care if you're Elon Musk or you're, a startup in a college dorm room. We all get the same amount of hours in a day. So if you don't manage that time appropriately, then when you pay attention, how productive will it be?
Right. And I think that's such a key point. You can't really separate the two. Right? Everybody's always talking about time management. But the key is that when you manage your time appropriately, you can actually pay attention to what you're supposed to do in that block of time that you've created and set apart, right? We talk about time blocking and we talk about putting things on your calendar for certain and specific reasons. And the whole point of that is 1 is to plan out your time, but 2 is to really encourage your attention to be focused on that particular item. And a lot of times people feel like time gets away from them and they don't feel like they have a lot of time because they're trying to do too many things. They're multitasking. And this goes back to something we spoke about recently about multitasking and how it's really about single tasking. Because when you single task something, you could actually give it the attention that it deserves. So in the next section, we're going to talk about setting the intention to drive your attention. So what does it mean to really set the intention and then you can drive your attention? Well, you got to be very specific about what you're going to do. And intention, why you're doing something or what's the purpose of doing something, is really comes down to 2 things in business. It's what's your vision and what are your goals to accomplish that vision, right? Because once you have that very specific vision, you can make all the decisions necessary in your business to achieve the goals that you are going to set in order to achieve the vision. So Adam, what are some things that we talk about in setting goals for people in order to drive their attention to those goals?
Yeah, when it comes to goals, right, we all have many, many goals in our life, many goals in our business. Okay. But then we have priorities. And this is really where I think you have the ability to set the attention so you can direct that action, that attention. So set the intention so you could direct the attention. I can see how people could conflate those two. And what we really try to speak about, Tom and I, is if you prioritize things, then you can get down to the core level of what is the purpose of it, right? And intention is really stemmed from purpose. You're trying to accomplish something. So we recently in our community, we were helping people with branding and marketing, and they were going through this exercise where they were going to get on and they were going to try to set appointments. Marketing, right? It's asking for an opportunity to pitch. So they were going through the process of doing it, and one person had like 7 different steps to get to asking the appointment. And I said, well, what's the purpose of you marketing right now? Okay. And they said, well, I want to set up more appointments. I said, okay. So then what's the intention behind this purpose? And they're like, well, I would get them on a Zoom meeting. I said, okay. So you want to get them on a Zoom meeting. I said, great. So now what do we really need to pay attention to in order to do that? Right. And that started to allow them to understand, here is my intention. My intention is to get them on a Zoom meeting. So now what actions do I have to line up with that to get it done? And what we realized through this process is they had 6 or 7 steps when they really only needed 2, right? They needed to tell them a little bit of why they would meet and then give them a Zoom link. And they just needed those 2 things. And they were trying to do way too much because they were not really paying attention to the intention. They were thinking forward about the sale and about the product and about the onboarding process and about the work they'd have to do. And it's like, but if you prioritize, first let me get the appointment, then I can worry about selling them when I'm on that appointment. And the intention, when it changed, their attention drastically expanded and allowed them to focus more.
And I think that that's such a brilliant point that you just made. It really allowed them to focus more because they stopped worrying about where they needed to go and they were focused on the present moment. And that's really one of the things that I want people to get out of this is if you set the right intentions, you know exactly where to spend your attention, and you then allow yourself to be more present in the activities that you're actually doing. And that further presence in the moment allows you to be, in the end, more productive with what you're doing. Like for example, when we do the power hour and we set those 15-minute timers to do either branding or marketing or relationship building, those 15 minutes are so packed with intention, right? Who we are and what we want to do is intention number 1. That's what we want to communicate to someone. We want them to know exactly who we are and what we do. So the only attention that we really pay is making sure that we're communicating in all the activities who we are and what we do. And we're not getting distracted by asking them for an appointment or trying to make a sale or focused on building a relationship. It's very attentive to just making sure that we express who we are and what we do during that 15 minutes of branding. And I think what happens and what we see in our community when we do this is that people really contact a lot of people in a very short amount of time, whether it's to an instant message or a DM or an email or what have you. People can be very productive in that 15 minutes when they are extremely intentional about where they're directing their attention. So in the next segment, we're going to talk a little bit about the 4 quadrants of attention management. Okay, so the 4 quadrants of attention management. Now, the 4 quadrants are really based on the amount of attention you need to pay to a situation and how much you have to control your attention. So think of it this way. Attention is either a low amount of attention or a high amount of attention that you're giving to an activity. The control over your attention is either a high amount of control where you really have to put yourself in a place to not get distracted and not get overwhelmed and really stay focused, versus a lower level of control over your attention, which we'll explain in the best quadrant of all of these, as I see as the best quadrant. So Adam, why don't we talk about what the 4 quadrants are? So what is the first quadrant that really focuses on a low amount of attention but a low amount of concentration or control over that attention. That's
Tom, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No. What were you going to say?
I was going to say that's reactive and the distracted. That's the first quadrant. So why don't you talk about that one?
Why don't you go through the quadrants? Because this is literally your area of expertise. I'll add in when I feel there's value.
Great. Fine. Perfect. All right. So the 4 quadrants, the first one is reactive and distracted. Either you have a low level of control of your attention and your attention is relatively low. This is where you are trying to multitask. This is where, you are distracted quite easily. People are dropping into your office. You're answering the phone, or as soon as the push notification comes, you hear it go off and you're touching that phone and looking at it. That phase, that quadrant, is a very, very low level of attention, and you're not really trying to control it. So if you were trying to control your attention a little bit more and you had a higher level of attention, you could actually live in a focused and mindful quadrant, which is one of the quadrants. And focused and mindful is really about being fully present, but deliberately avoiding the distraction. So when you're reactive and distracted, you're not doing anything to avoid getting distracted. So take the example of a job interview. You go on a job interview, or you're having a very specific conversation with someone. You're putting all of your attention into that conversation. And if something happens outside of you, your phone vibrates, or you hear something out in the hallway, you don't allow yourself to become distracted by that, because you are very heavily controlling your attention. And you're also giving a high level of attention to that interview, that conversation, that meeting. So when you make an effort for an extended period of time to give your attention to that focused activity, you are maintaining a control and an attention level that is relatively high. Now, sometimes we get distracted, but we start to daydream. And when we start to daydream, we enter this quadrant of daydreaming, where our attention tends to be low, but our level of concentration is a little bit higher than it is in the previous reactive or distracted phase. So when we daydream, we actually make a conscious choice to not focus on anything in particular. We let very few things around us get us going. We're kind of off in a mind-wandering pattern. So think about the in-between moments where you don't take out your phone, where you're in between a meeting, or you step away from a meeting and you're just walking down the hallway and you start to think about something that was discussed, or you just let your mind wander so that you can restore yourself. You're typically in that daydreaming. And that daydreaming is not necessarily a distraction. That daydreaming is actually more of an intention to restore your mind's energy, your way of thinking, so that you can relax the level of attention, yet you're still applying some control to that. The last quadrant is the fun quadrant, and this one aligns the most with one of our 9 principles called being in the zone of genius. And it's really called flow. And have you ever gotten into a state of flow where time just passes you by and you're all of a sudden it's 2 hours and you've been working on something? Well, that's the state of flow, where you don't typically have to have a high level of control over your attention, but you're giving the activity a lot of attention. It's the state in which you're laser focused, you're fully absorbed by the work. You're kind of like having an out-of-body experience, because you're such in a flow and such a state of no effort, and such a state of being fully absorbed by the work. So when you're trained at something and you do it really well, this would be an example of getting into flow. Doing the work that you absolutely enjoy doing because it comes to you so naturally and really can be effortless. So that's the 4 quadrants. So Adam, what do you think? What do you struggle with the most in the 4 quadrants? Which one is the one that you really find yourself working in most of the time?
Yeah, I mean, look, you asked the wrong question of a guy like me. I don't struggle in any of these quadrants, but I am very aware of when I'm in which quadrants and why I'm there and how I got there. Because, as you're saying here, is I set intention for nearly everything that I do. You know, I spend 20 minutes before I do anything preparing anything. Okay, I don't just randomly go into stuff. So, what I'm taking away from this before I go and where I spend the time is so you're saying attention is you either have low attention or you have high attention. And then when it's either low or high, you're saying I have high control or low control.
Correct.
And what I took away was the goal really, or one of the most optimal ways of these quadrants is to have a lot of attention and very low control, meaning like it's just naturally happening, right? You're doing your best work because your attention is laser focused, but you really don't have to control it. You're just doing it. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yep, 100%. You hit it on the head. The goal is for us to be in either flow or focused and mindful states, and those require a higher level of attention. And the higher control is in that focused and mindful where you're making an effort to not be distracted by anything. Whereas when you're in flow, you don't have to make the effort. You just are doing because you are consumed and fully absorbed into the work that you're doing, that nothing is going to really distract you from that. So if you really think about it, this is all about distractibility. It's how much you're distracted by things going on outside of you, how much effort you have to put into not being as distracted. And the more effort that you put in, the more control when you're paying a good amount of attention to something, the less likely you will be distracted and you will not be, and the less likely you won't be able to accomplish something.
So I'd like to challenge one quadrant then.
Sure.
So it seems the opposite of flow is daydreaming, which is very low attention and very high control. Is that correct?
Yes, 100%.
Okay. I find that I am daydreaming a lot, but here's the reason why I think it's actually a positive is because I don't randomly do that. I intentionally say, I'm going to allow myself to daydream right now. Some of my best work, some of my best ideas come from daydreaming. But when I found that I allotted an intention to the freedom of daydreaming, I was still focused. I allowed it to just flow without any intention because the intention was allow this to happen.
Right.
So it's just a challenge to this is I don't think any of us are really handcuffed to any of these 4 quadrants. And I think if you manage your time and when am I going to be in these quadrants and manage the intention of why am I in these quadrants, you know, besides the reactive and distractive, that one I think is really nothing positive can come out of that.
Correct.
Okay, but what are your thoughts on challenging the daydreaming one?
Yeah, no, I agree with you, and I think you're 100% right. Remember, I said that when you're daydreaming, you're actually choosing, and you are by choosing, you set the intention, and you're choosing the focus of what you want to daydream about or give yourself the time for. And you're 100% right too. The distracted and the reactive is that least attentive, that lowest control phase that a lot of us want to get out of. I see it as 3 really good phases versus 1 not so good, right? I don't see it as I don't see any of these necessarily as bad, but it's when, you know, what comes out of it is recognizing, and again, it's awareness. It's always awareness that we're trying to improve here. And attention management is really an awareness to where you're using your attention and how much energy you're putting into controlling it or not, right? Because if you can put your energy if you have to put a lot of energy into controlling your attention, you're going to be more of that focused and mindful, but that's going to be exhausting. Think about what happens when you come out of a really important meeting or a very important presentation or a job interview. You're quite tired after that because you've used such a high level of energy staying focused and not distracted and fighting off the distractions. Whereas the daydreaming requires you don't have to be as attentive, but you definitely have to control it more,
Right.
because so that you can accomplish something in that daydream. Because I still think out of daydreaming comes, like you said, major accomplishments. You have great ideas, you innovate. That's the time where you have some freedom of thought, and you're not beholden to all of this. I have to pay attention to what's going on around me, and purposefully avoid distraction. In
But it's interesting.
daydreaming, they come in and they go out.
It's interesting where you move from daydreaming, right? So if I moved from daydreaming to reactive and distracted, it would not be positive. But if I moved from daydreaming to being in a state of flow, that could actually be very positive.
Absolutely.
So I think these quadrants, as you said, there's no real bad ones, just being aware of it, but also potentially being aware of where am I moving through these quadrants.
Right. Right. And how do I move through them? And what do I need to do? Like, there are some days, there's some days where you just sit down and you go, I'm just so distracted today. And you're not sure what to do. And some people give up, and people just chase, fun things to do because they don't want to do the thing they have to do. And if they just refer to, all right, what do I need to get a little bit more focused and mindful, right? So one of the things that Maura Thomas talks about in attention management is shutting off turning off monitors. If you have multiple monitors, only be focused on one monitor with one thing to do. Don't have your email open. Don't have 92 websites open. Eliminate those distractions so that you can focus, because sometimes when you're so distracted, you don't even realize all the things that are distracting you.
Right. Joe Rogan, when he writes for his comedy, he writes on Microsoft Word, and he puts it into what's called focused mode.
Oh.
And so he could pay attention to just that. He puts his phone aside, and there's nothing else, no internet, no other alerts or bells or whistles, or it's just that. And that's how he writes.
Yeah. So the next section is, how do you implement this in your day-to-day? So we'll talk about that next. All right. So how do we take attention management, time management, and really improve it in our day and use our time and make sure that we're directing our attention appropriately? And that really comes down to an activity that Adam and I have done for a long time. We've even written a book about it called The Morning Meeting. And one of the activities in the morning meeting is to set your priorities for the day and to plan out your day and map out exactly what you need to do. So Adam, what is your method that you'd like to do? Do you like to do it at night, the day before? Do you do it in the morning? How do you set your priorities?
Yeah, I typically like to do them it's the second to last thing I do. I set my intention for the next day based on what my priorities are, and then I get ready for bed, and I go to bed with a relaxed mind, understanding that, okay, I know what I'm doing tomorrow. I no longer have to think about it. So for me, that's why I like to do it at the end of my day.
That's great. So I like to do it in the morning so I can have a better mindset of where am I going next, and because I don't always remember from the night before where to go. So if you're like me and you don't have a great memory and you want to make sure that you've mapped it out, start first thing in the morning. Do your regular morning meeting, do your routine of your gratitudes and looking at what went right and what went wrong and what do you need to work on or what you need help with, because that's all going to direct your priorities. And if you get a copy of our morning meeting, I think you'll really see that you could improve how you spend your time and how you direct your attention by setting the key priorities for the day. And one of the things I would recommend is that we have so many things that distract us every single day. And what we have to recognize is that in any given moment, there could be something that's trying to interfere with what we're doing. But what we have to do, and what setting the priorities does, is allow us to stay focused on what the priority is, but it also gives us the opportunity to find the space for those interferences. If you're using your time appropriately and you're paying attention to the things that you're supposed to pay attention to, you will definitely redirect the interferences and give them their own place. And I think that's one of the things that I really would hope you take away from this.
There's many more ways you can implement this, right?
Yep.
Okay. And as I said, the evening, I like to do that so I know what my next day looks like. And you said maybe I don't have a good memory and I have to think about this, but I write that down, right? So I do not have to memorize anything. I have this written down in a planner. I put that on my calendar as needed. But then what I still do is I actively use our own book, The Morning Meeting, to look at what are my top 3 priorities. And here's why. When I am trying to be in flow, okay, and make sure my attention management is set according to what the intentions of the day are, I have to understand what the priorities are. Okay. And those 3 priorities are non-negotiables. So what I would say is, if you want to implement this, you have to have your non-negotiables that these will get done regardless of whatever the rest of the day brings. You may have 20 things on your to-do list, but you have to make sure you prioritize the top 3. And when you're going about doing this, okay, it's going to give you a freedom that you will get them done. I'd never want anybody to push off what they have to do to tomorrow. I would much rather you accomplish it today, and then if there are more things you need to do, borrow them from tomorrow. And what that freedom of saying, I only really have 3 priorities today, allows you to do is give the attention without having to have massive control over it. Because when we're trying to control things, at least for me, I'm usually trying to control my time. And that's how we started saying the time management and the attention management, you can't have one without the other. So when I would like to be in a state of flow, which is the most productive for me, but I'm not in control of my time because there's so many other things that need to be done, I may actually move myself out of flow and into reactive and distracted. And that's the key here about the priority, is making sure that, okay, I know exactly what I'm going to do, and I give myself the space to give it the attention it deserves. So I think that's one of the key areas here, is making sure that you're giving yourself this permission to say, this is what I'm going to accomplish. Okay. If you're saying putting way too much on your plate, you will just be in reactive and distracted mode all day long.
Right.
Like, you'll be putting out every fire and you're trying to handle this, and I'm going to multitask and get it all in. And, I'm managing my time so well because I got so much done. And what I say is, when you're trying to be productive, it's not about getting more done in your day. It's about getting more done, getting more out of what you do. Okay. So I'll say it again. It's not about getting more done in your day. It's about getting more out of what you do. You may do one thing today and that's it. But if you get more out of that than if you did 20 things poorly, what's more effective? And that's where I really think the value of the time management and the attention management comes in for us and our clients.
That was a great segue, man, to the end of our session here, out of our conclusion. So here's 2 things that I really want people to take away from this. Number 1, the goal of this is to get today's work done today, and to have the biggest impact that you can have on the few priorities that you do set out to do. And recognize that it really is about attention management, and it's not just about time management and putting things on the calendar and giving them their space. It's the intention that you set to getting the work done and giving it the attention that it deserves. And the other thing I want people to take away from this is that it really does require that you find yourself and create an awareness of where you sit throughout the course of your day. There may be times in the day where you are reactive and distracted. There may be times in the day where you're in flow. The key is to be able to recognize that, because when you can recognize it, it will be less overwhelming when you find yourself not getting the things done, especially when you're living in that reactive and distracted phase. And it happens to all of us. We live in a day and age of technology where we all have an attention span of 3 seconds. So it is not something that is very easy for us because of all of the information that is flowing in from all over. There are a lot of ways to reduce the amount of distractions. You turn off your phone, or you stop getting so many push notifications, or you silence the number of notifications you get, or you shut off the number of screens that you have going at once. But the key is that don't overwhelm yourself with distractables, because in order for you to really get what you need to get done and have an impact on your day, your life, your business, whatever it means, is you have to pay attention to what you're doing and only give it to the key 3 things that you need to do. because you don't want to take it into tomorrow. Because when we take it into tomorrow, it's another opportunity for us to get distracted. It's another opportunity for us to not do it. So get today's work done today. Focus on your attention. Give it the time, give the task the priority, the time that it deserves, and you will be much more successful in everything that you do.
And what I would add to that is, don't forget, if you're new to this, Tom and I put an extensive amount of effort into bringing you this information. But we actually have an additional piece of information that gets released every Monday, and that is our newsletter called Particles, where we actually expound and expand upon what we've done here today to bring you even more value for this specific topic. So you can sign up for that on our website, or you can send us a message and we'll get you to sign up for that. But that will take this even deeper so you can implement it more effectively.